Hi, Bernie here again. Let's continue with day 6 of Genesis. Genesis, as you know, means beginnings. And we're talking about the creation according to Genesis chapter 1. And I will continue to read verse 24 to 27. And because so much happened on the 6th day, we will have to do part 1 for this study. Let's read verses 24 to 27. Verse 24, and God said, let the earth bring forth the living creature after his kind, cattle and creeping thing and beast of the earth after his kind. And it was so. Notice there's different kinds and categories of animals. And God made the beast of the earth after his kind, the cattle after their kind, and everything that creeps upon the earth after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And God said, verse 26, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the air, over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that crawls upon the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him, male and female created he them. The point here is early in the 6th day of creation, according to our Bible, God created the land animals. Here we find a repeat of kinds, or the species limitation. We find the references in verses 11, 12, 21, 24, and 25. This means that God definitely permits no viable cross species. So contrary to modern humanistic teaching, which we learn in the schools, in the public schools, one species cannot randomly change and adapt and become a new, more complex species. Now, of all the land animals God created, let's see if the words of verses 24 and 25 tell us something important. Point number one, God separated all life into kinds. There's the wolf kind, the dog kind, and all these kinds. God's word was a declaration into existence. That's point number two. We know that because in the book of Genesis, every time something happens, and it definitely happens, we read, and it was so. Point number three. In verse 25, God made 3 different categories of kinds of land animals. 3 different categories. First, we have the beasts of the earth. The beasts of the earth would be the wild or feral or untamed or untamable animals. An example of that would be the lions and tigers and bears. Oh my! Lions and tigers. Oh, sorry. I got carried away with the Wizard of Oz. But the whole thing is, that was the beasts of the earth. Second, let's see, there's 3 kinds. Second, the verse mentions cattle. Interesting. Does cattle only refer to cows? No. In the Hebrew language, This would refer to tameable or domestic animals, or animals that were meant to depend on man to survive. Yes, there are animals that can only depend on man to survive. Of course, the cow would be the example. As a matter of fact, even the camel is an example. And so are sheep, and believe it or not, pigs. There are cattle that depend on man to survive. These are the tameable creatures. And the last category is the most disgusting category: bugs and insects and creepy crawly creatures. Like we spoke about before, I don't think it included mosquitoes, because mosquitoes was part of the fowl that came from the water. But all the other insects, yuck! Man, it gives me the heebie-jeebies. But point number 4, I'll tell you, God saw it was good. That means every one of these animals had a purpose. Every one of those 3 groups had a purpose. Each kind of life served a specific purpose for the arrival of God's final masterpiece. Although sometimes I would like to argue that God's final masterpiece was man. God acknowledged the goodness of what was created so far. And by acknowledging the goodness, this meant that God was glorified. Now, the next act of creation was the creation of people. And for that, I would like to do another video. And until that time, so long.